All right, let's jump into a world that is often more fantasy than reality. Um, we're going deep, deep into the life of a dominatrix, a professional dominatrix. Our guide for this deep dive is an interview with Mistress Kay.
It's fascinating, you know? We think BDSM and we immediately picture whips and chains and that sort of thing, but there's so much more to it. There's a whole psychology behind it. A lot of people don't realize that. What leads someone to seek out domination or to be the dominant one? That's what we're going to try to unpack today.
Exactly. And get this, Mistress Kay. She reveals that domination, it's not always what you see in movies. Um, it can be mental or financial or physical. That really surprised me.
It really challenges the common perception of it all, yeah. And that's where the whole world of BDSM comes in. Mistress K makes it very clear that it's all about consensual power exchange. You know, bondage, discipline, dominance and submission, sadism and masochism. She even talks about discussing everything with clients beforehand, like everything, sometimes even using contracts to lay out boundaries and expectations.
Contracts. That's
Yeah.
not something you usually think about with, like, a dungeon. Right? It sounds more like, I don't know, business negotiations.
It does, it does. It brings a level of formality and structure, I think, that really challenges how we usually see BDSM.
Mm-hmm.
Mistress K also, she emphasizes safe words and making sure those safe words are unique to each client to avoid any misinterpretations, you know, especially during more intense scenes. So it's about creating this safe space, a controlled environment where everyone feels comfortable exploring.
You know, it makes you wonder, why would someone want to give up control? I mean, most of us, we spend our lives trying to gain control, not give it up.
That is a great question, and it's really at the heart of this whole thing. Mistress K says that submissives, they have a psychological need for this kind of dynamic. They actually seek out being controlled by a dominant partner. Think of someone who's incredibly powerful in their everyday life, like a CEO or something. They might actually crave submission as a way to, like, release, you know, a way
Mhm.
to let go of all that pressure and responsibility that they carry around all the time.
It's almost like a counterbalance to their regular life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So instead of being in charge all the time, they can actually surrender control and maybe experience a different kind of freedom that way.
Yeah.
This is really making me think differently about power dynamics, honestly.
Yeah, it's definitely a shift in perspective. Speaking of different perspectives, Mistress K also mentioned that it's not always so black and white. Some people, they enjoy both dominating and submitting. Those are what she calls switches.
So there's this whole range of experiences within the BDSM community. It's not just one thing for everyone. Let's talk about, like, the practical side of Mistress K's work. What does it actually look like? What kind of things does she offer?
So she does a wide range, like from virtual sessions all the way to in-person meetings. The virtual world, it opens up so many possibilities. Phone calls, texting, video calls, uh, even remote-controlled toys. For those who can't meet in person or just prefer not to.
Wow, technology has really changed things, hasn't it? It makes you wonder about intimacy and connection in the digital age.
Yeah, it's definitely blurring the lines between, like, fantasy and reality. But even with in-person meetings, Mistress K, she prefers to have a first meeting. She says it's more like a date, you know, so clients can ask questions and get to know her and make sure that they feel comfortable before, you know, things progress. It shows a level of, I don't know, professionalism and consideration that people might not expect.
But isn't there something strange about, like, making something so intimate and personal as power exchange, like so structured and formal?
Hmm.
Does it lose its authenticity when it becomes a business transaction?
That's a really interesting point. Does the structure make it better by creating a safe space, or does it, you know, take away from the spontaneity? I think it depends on the individual and what they need and desire.
It sounds like Mistress K has really thought this through, though. It's not just diving in. She's creating a framework and prioritizing safety and consent.
Absolutely. That emphasis on safety is so important, especially because there are risks involved. Mistress K, she shares a story about a submissive who actually died. It was from a latex allergy during a session with another dominatrix, sadly.
Wow, that's heartbreaking. It really shows that this is serious. This isn't just a game. So how does Mistress K make sure something like that never happens with her clients?
She takes a lot of precautions. First of all, she has a very thorough screening process for new clients, including background checks. And she insists on having those initial meetings in public places, with security present, too.
So she's going above and beyond what we might expect. It's reassuring to know that she's taking safety seriously for herself and her clients.
It shows her professionalism and her ethical approach.
Hmm.
And now we're going to get into the different types of domination that Mistress K practices. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's dive in. What are those categories of domination?
Well, she talked about three main categories: physical, mental, and, wait for it, financial domination.
Financial domination. Now, that's something I've never heard of before. Tell me more.
It's actually more complex than you might think. Mistress Kay described it as the gratification coming from the submissive feeling amazing that they're serving her financially. It's not just about the money, it's about the psychology of it.
Have you ever bought something and you were like strangely satisfied, even though it wasn't really something you needed? Maybe there's like a little element of this power dynamic at play there.
Maybe. Maybe we all have a little bit of dominatrix or submissive inside of us, even if we don't take it to that level.
Now, that's a fascinating thought. It seems like Mistress K's work is pushing us to think differently
Mm-hmm.
about power, control, and even our own desires.
It really is. And we're just getting started here. There's so much more to uncover about Mistress K's world, from her specific practices to the psychological and social implications of it all.
I'm ready to go deeper. What else can you tell me about financial domination?
Well, one thing that stood out to me was Mistress K said the gratification comes from like the submissive feeling amazing that they're serving her financially. It's not just about the money itself, it's about the whole psychological dynamic that comes with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Makes me think, is there a connection to traditional gender roles?
Mm.
Maybe. Like historically, men have often been the providers,
Right.
And women the receivers. So could this be like a way of flipping those roles?
Yeah.
Or playing with them in a safe and consensual way?
That's a great point. It's very possible that these practices, they tap into those deeply ingrained societal norms and allow people to explore them in new ways, unconventional ways. Mistress K actually mentioned that some of her clients are couples, and they use financial domination in their relationship.
So it's not just individual needs then. It can be a way to like enhance or explore a relationship that's already there.
Exactly. It shows how adaptable these practices are and how they can be like tailored to different desires and circumstances.
It sounds like Mistress K really understands the psychology behind it all. How did she even get into this? Was it something she always wanted to do?
It's a pretty interesting story, actually. She discovered early on that she had this ability to kind of manipulate in a way. Like she realized she could influence people and situations to her advantage. But, it wasn't like a sudden decision to become a dominatrix. She sought out guidance from others who were experienced and really thought about it before, making it her profession.
So it was a deliberate choice, not just a, a spur of the moment thing,
Yeah.
which makes sense given her emphasis on safety and consent.
Yeah, definitely. And it's reflected in the range of services she offers, from, light tickling to more intense physical play. It's always tailored to the client's needs and desires. It's very personalized.
Makes sense given the variety of people who seek out her services.
Mm.
But how do you even find a dominatrix? It's not like something people just openly talk about, is it?
You're right. Discretion is very important in this world. Mistress K relies mostly on word-of-mouth referrals. It helps maintain confidentiality and also ensures that she's working with people who really understand and respect the dynamics at play.
But even with all that discretion, I imagine there are still challenges
Mm-hmm.
and misconceptions that she have to deal with. What are some of those things that we might not think about?
Well, one thing is that she's extremely careful about who she works with. She has a very strict screening process for new clients, asks for ID, researches their background. It's to ensure safety and avoid any legal problems.
Right. So it's not just about, meeting the client's needs. It's about protecting herself, too, both
Mhm.
physically and legally. That's a side of things we don't always consider.
Exactly. And it can even extend to her personal life, too. She mentioned that, like, some people in her life know about her profession, some don't. And navigating those boundaries can be really tricky.
It really highlights the stigma that's still out there.
Yeah.
Even though we're, having this open conversation about it, there's still so much judgment and misunderstanding.
That's true. And it's important to remember that everyone has their own journey, right? Their own comfort levels with exploring their sexuality and their desires. Mistress K's story is just one perspective. It's not representative of everyone. It's really important to respect those differences and not make generalizations.
Absolutely. We're getting a specific perspective here, but it's not the only one. We can't assume that everyone in the BDSM community has the same the same experiences or motivations.
Right. And that's why these kinds of conversations, open and honest conversations, are so important. They help break down stereotypes and help us understand this subculture that's often misunderstood.
Yeah. Speaking of breaking down stereotypes, one thing that surprised me about Mistress K was how much emphasis she puts on those initial date-like meetings. It doesn't really fit the image of the, like, cold, domineering dominatrix, does it?
It doesn't, no. But it's a really important part of her process. She wants to get to know the client, answer any questions, and make sure they feel completely comfortable before anything progresses. It's about building trust and setting clear expectations.
Yeah, it sounds like she's bringing a real sense of humanity and care to this profession,
Yeah.
which is, not something we necessarily expect.
Exactly. It challenges our assumptions and shows that it's about more than just, fulfilling fantasies. It's about human connection and exploring boundaries and understanding those psychological needs in a safe way.
It makes you wonder if that's what draws people to her specifically. Maybe they're looking for more than just domination. Maybe they're also looking for understanding and validation.
That's definitely possible. It speaks to how complex human relationships are and human desires. We may not all identify with the specific practices of BDSM, but the underlying themes, like power, control, surrender, those resonate with a lot of people on some level.
Yeah, it all comes back to that idea that we started with. It's not just about whips and chains. It's about those psychological dynamics that exist in all human interactions, just magnified and explored in a more deliberate way.
Right. And speaking of deliberate, one thing we haven't talked about is the financial aspect. Mistress K, she charges for her services, and she's very open about that.
Right? It is a business after all. But isn't there a conflict there? Like commodifying something so personal as power exchange, does putting a price on it, does that diminish the authenticity of it?
That's a really good question, and it's definitely something that Mistress K has thought about. From what she said, it seems like she sees it as a way to value her time, her expertise, and the unique services that she provides. It's about, setting professional boundaries and making sure the exchange is beneficial for both sides.
Right. And it also reinforces that this is a legitimate profession like any other. It requires skill and knowledge and a deep understanding of psychology.
Absolutely. And just like any other profession, it comes with, ethical considerations and best practices.
We've covered a lot, haven't we? From defining the dominatrix to exploring different types of domination to the psychology behind it and even the business side of things. It's been a fascinating deep dive into a world that's often hidden and misunderstood.
It really is, and it challenges us to think about our own assumptions. Just because something is unfamiliar or taboo doesn't mean it's, wrong or harmful.
Exactly. It's about approaching things with an open mind and a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, what the deep dive is all about.
Speaking of learning, there's one more thing about Mistress K's practice that I think is really interesting. She mentioned that she's really, really strict about her pricing. Like she has a set rate and she doesn't negotiate it.
Hmm. That's interesting. It's almost a statement about how much she values what she does. It's not just about making money, It's about setting a standard and maintaining that professionalism.
Right, exactly. It shows that this is serious work. It takes skill and experience and a deep understanding of the whole dynamic. And it sets those clear boundaries right from the beginning.
Yeah, no room for haggling or anything. Makes you think even something like BDSM can be approached with structure and business smarts.
It's about that balance, between the personal and the professional, the intimate and the structured. I think Mistress K does a really good job of navigating all of that.
It's definitely changed how I think about this world. We've gone from whips and chains to contracts and pricing structures. What a journey.
And hopefully an enlightening one. We've talked about so much, the different types of domination, the psychology behind it, the safety and consent, even the business side of things. It's been a really fascinating look into this subculture.
Definitely. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways is the emphasis on consent. It really challenges how BDSM is often portrayed,
Right.
Like in movies and TV shows, it's often exploitative.
Yeah, I agree. Mistress K's approach is so thoughtful and so professional. It's clear that she cares about her clients and their well-being. It's not about power over someone. It's about power with someone.
It goes back to that idea of fulfilling a need, both for the dominant and the submissive. They're both looking for something specific in this dynamic, right?
Mm.
And it's about creating a safe space for that, a consensual space.
And it makes you wonder, is there a little bit of this in all of us, even if we don't explore it in such an extreme way, maybe we all crave some level of control or surrender in our relationships, even in subtle ways.
That's an interesting thought. Maybe dominance and submission aren't just about, the extremes, but about those everyday power dynamics that we all experience.
Exactly. Think about the roles we play in our families, at work, with friends. There's always this give and take, this pushing and pulling. Maybe BDSM is just a more conscious way of exploring those same dynamics.
So, as our listeners think about that, what's the one thing you hope they take away from this deep dive?
I hope they've gained a better understanding of this subculture. BDSM, it's not just about sex. It's about exploring desires, pushing boundaries, and finding connection in ways that we don't usually think about.
That's a great way to put it. And who knows, maybe this has sparked some curiosity in our listeners. Maybe they'll start to see those power dynamics in their own lives, in their relationships in a new way.
Or maybe they'll just have a new appreciation for human desire and how complex it is. Either way, it's been a really fascinating journey.
Well, on that note, we'll let you keep exploring these ideas on your own. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of professional dominatrixes. And who knows what other fascinating subcultures we'll be unpacking in the future. Until next time, stay curious.